Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/First Paw Media.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our Day 2 coverage of the 2021 Iditarod here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And tonight we are joined by my co-host Alex Stein. He is calling in from California. Tony Ryder will join us tomorrow night. But Alex, how's it going today?
It's going great. I did not stay up all night watching the trackers as I usually do. I'm trying to ease into it a little bit this year, but it is, as I was telling you off air, I think I was totally wrong in saying that this would be a Iditarod that was about the same speed and about the same length for the winner to come in as previous races, because looking at what's gone on in the past 24, 30 hours or so, these teams are burning up the trail.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I believe it's Ryan Reddington is already in Rhone, which is 200 miles or so into the race. So he's already a quarter of the way done, and it's only the first day. Yeah, I think it's going to be a speedy one. I know we do have those 36 hours of rest that is mandatory along the trail. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. As you said last night, we're going to start seeing a lot of that leapfrogging as folks take longer and longer rests. But what's interesting, if we can kick off with this, Alex, that not a lot of folks are camping along the trail like we thought they would. They're coming into the checkpoints and they're doing their normal routines, even though they aren't having the quote unquote comforts of the normal checkpoints, but they are pretty much keeping course to a regular race, aren't they?
Yeah, they're sort of camping in the dog parking areas where the checkpoints have been set up. So there's I've seen a bunch of pictures where there are 5 or 6 or 7 teams that are all sort of laid out next to each other, fairly close to each other, but still properly distanced. And that is not an unusual thing to see, but it'll be interesting to see. You know, we've seen some people like Martin Boozer has his tent, and he brings his tent will like appear in the middle of these dog parking areas, and but so far it looks like a lot of people are just staying very close to their sleds and very close to their dogs.
So we are about 4 or 5 checkpoints into the race right now. As you mentioned, Ryan Reddington's in Rhone, so we've had, Yetna, Squintna, Finger Lake, Rainy Pass, and then on over to where he's at. Have you heard anything on the video or interviews or anything of the such about the COVID protocols now that we're several checkpoints in?
It looks like they are being observed from what I've seen, or at least if they're not, we haven't been shown that. And so it looks like people are taking this seriously. Both the mushers, the volunteers, the staff, and the locals are all trying to take this very seriously. At least that's what it appears to be. And that's a really good thing. We heard a lot of mushers who were interviewed before the race and at the first couple of checkpoints expressing just a tremendous amount of gratitude that the race is going on at all. So I think that there is an awareness that these are the rules that have to be followed, and people are making a really concerted effort to make sure that they do follow these rules so that the race can continue.
So as of right now, we've had 2 mushers that have scratched. We talked about Sean Williams yesterday. He scratched right before the start of the race there at Deshka Landing. But we have another one that happened in Skwentna. What do you know?
Yeah, so Cindy Galley, who is from Minnesota, and we talked a little bit about her having all those difficulties getting across the border with her dog truck, then was able to raise some money to fly up and fly her dogs up here. And she apparently has scratched at Skwentna. What seems to have happened is she developed a case of vertigo and was unable to stand behind the dog sled and wouldn't have been able to take care of her dogs if she had gone forward, if she'd been able to go forward. Apparently this happened to her once before, about 7 or 8 years ago, and cleared up within 2 or 3 days after it happened. She is back in Anchorage, is resting and being taken care of, and her dogs are all fine and being taken care of. And she said that her dogs had a really good 65-mile run out to Skwentna, but unfortunately she wasn't able to continue and be able to provide the level of dog care that's needed.
And as they used to say on the ABC Sports, the agony of defeat, can you just imagine what was going through her mind after all those trials and tribulations to get up here to start the race and all that it took, that massive effort with her supporters and raising funds and all sorts of stuff just to get up here and have a medical crisis that you obviously never know is going to come about. But I can only imagine how scary that would be to be on the back of the runners in the middle of nowhere and possibly faint for no real apparent reason. That could be a scary situation, couldn't it?
Yeah, very scary. And, I've talked to a lot of mushers and to you a little bit about this as well. And it seems that for a lot of people, there's a tremendous amount of anxiety when they're still on the fence a little bit and they're not sure whether or not to scratch. But almost every musher that I've spoken to about this, who's talked about scratching, has said that once they make the decision, that they become very, very calm and they just realize this is the right thing to do. I've been spending, hours trying to figure out how to go on, and sometimes you just have to realize this is not going to happen.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there. And what's even more anxious is when you're in a race and you're out there miles and miles from a checkpoint and you notice that your dogs just aren't right, whether they have a bad gait or something's happening with one dog, say they're acting a little funny, and it's tough to make those decisions because your primary focus every step that they take is on that dog. Should I stop? Should I put him in the bag? Do we need to rest? Do we need to camp? All these decisions are just going through your mind a mile a minute. And it really doesn't matter if you just started this sport this year or you've been at it a while. It is a taxing process to think about what's over the next turn, so to speak, if you are in that position of having to scratch or not. And almost always it's a unforeseen circumstance that comes about. Most people don't, fly into a checkpoint and say, that's it, I'm done. It almost always has something to do with something that happened between that last checkpoint and the checkpoint where you eventually scratch. It's a tough thing to do. I've done it on many occasions, and like I said, it's something that is really anxious to think about. So any other news about any other mushers on the trail before we jump into our story for the evening, and then, of course, our much-awaited musher profile?
Yeah, there was a glitch, a kind of amusing glitch that I think annoyed a lot of people about the trackers, which is that last night there was some sort of software bug or something. So the trackers somehow had it programmed into them that Skwetna, which was the first official checkpoint, I found out last night that Yetna is not actually a checkpoint this year, even though a lot of teams stopped there and everyone went past there. But it was programmed that Skwetna was the end of the race. So when teams would get to Skwetna, their status would change to finished, and then they would disappear from the tracker. And this was the case for a couple of hours, and they finally figured out what was wrong and fixed it. But it was very, very interesting, and a lot of people were complaining a lot about this sort of tracker glitch that suddenly Ryan Reddington was in Skwetna, and then he wasn't anywhere and was listed as having finished the race.
Yeah, I saw that tracker glitch too, and it's really interesting how it shows them finished already. And I don't know if they fixed it altogether. I know that trackers are the bane of an Iditarod's fan's existence. Is it pretty much settled now? Here we are at about 30 hours in.
Yeah, it seems to be. I anticipate there will be other tracker problems as the race progresses, just because there always are. And when there are tracker problems, I remember the days before there were trackers on all of the sleds, when you would just be hitting refresh on the standings page and you wouldn't know what was going on in between checkpoints. You just know when someone got to a checkpoint and when they left the checkpoint. So compared to that, and considering the remote areas that this race goes through, I try never to complain about the tracker. It's a little bit annoying, but at least we know what's going on.
Alex, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but in years past, they had the what they refer to as the phone room, where folks can call in and ask questions or possibly even send messages down the trail to mushers. It's sort of that call center vibe, kind of an old school type of reporting on the race. Is that happening this year? And I asked because you said yesterday that most of the reporting is being done remotely.
Yeah, that's still happening, and people can call in and send messages to teams. I don't know if they still have the call room set up at the Millennium, which is where it's traditionally been. But I know that you can still call in, and for people who want to do that and want to send a message to their favorite musher, it's delivered. It's sent up the trail and then delivered at checkpoints. I assume that's still happening this year, although I'm not positive. And the number, if you want to do that, is 907-248-MUSH. So that's 907-248-6874.
Excellent. We'll definitely put that in the show notes as well. So let's jump into our story of the evening. We're going to talk a little bit about drop bags. And for folks that follow mushing, you know what a drop bag is. It's all of your supplies that you ship down the trail. It includes dog food and snacks and extra runner plastic and booties and personal gear and clothing and batteries and just about everything you can think of. It's on its way down the trail, and it's one of the most interesting processes of mushing because you have to forecast what you think you're going to need over many, many days, and often these drop bags are due a couple of weeks before the race. So you have to take into account your run-rest schedule, your amount of miles that you're going between one checkpoint or not, whether you're going to camp along the trail, how well you think your dogs are going to eat in regard to weather, and all of these different things. And it's almost like packing for a vacation many, many times over. You're packing everything that you could possibly need without hoping you forget anything. And I watched the video right before the start, Alex, of Ali Zirkle, and she did a great little video about what she was packing in her sled and what she sent down the trail in her drop bags. And she said that, it's a little bit different this year because of the way the checkpoints are set up and the different race course and all of that. But otherwise, it's pretty common on what they pack and what they leave out. Almost always in the sled itself, they're only carrying the gear or supplies that they need to get from one checkpoint to another. They do have to carry some mandatory gear, including some extra food for the dogs and for the person. But otherwise, they're relying on getting to that next checkpoint for that drop bag. What do you know about drop bags in the process, Alex?
Yeah, so all of what you said, a lot of times people will pack things that they think they'll need for certain parts of the trail, like maybe a warmer parka for areas where they anticipate it's going to be really cold. People will pack spare pairs of gloves and socks and things like that, batteries for devices or for headlamps themselves. People food, or snacks that particularly like, they'll pack some of those, especially things that can be frozen, and then usually a lot of dog food. And I think, I'm not positive what the division is, but I think that each person who enters Iditarod gets a certain amount of weight for their drop bags that is free, and then they pay for the drop bag weight that's over that, and everyone always goes over. So there's always a cost to sending your drop bags, and you put them in bags that are that have labeled the names of the checkpoints, and then those are sent out by Iditarod and their partners to the checkpoints where they are kept, and lately are kept under guard as well, since there was the incident with Dallas CV's dogs a few years back. And one of the questions that we get a lot is, well, what happens to the stuff in the drop bags that isn't used? So, for example, what happens to Cindy Galley's drop bags? Because he's not going to be using any of the stuff from them, or at least nothing split up. And the quick answer is that personal items, so clothing and batteries and things like that, those are sent back to the mushers, although some years it takes quite a while for these things actually to make their way back. And if there is dog food, that is usually kept and distributed to dogs in the villages. That's not sent back. And I believe people food is probably not sent back either, although I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's interesting about the people food. I've been on races in the past where folks will drop out of the race, scratch or withdraw or whatever, and it is like a buffet for the mushers that are coming in. They have designated a spot for that stuff, and people will kind of pilfer through it and take what they want, and it's kind of an expected behavior on the race trail where folks have the ability to get that extra food, and in cases like Cindy's, where she has pretty much every drop bag along the trail, those will all either come back or, as you mentioned, will be distributed to the folks in the villages and or the mushers along the trail. One final thing on those drop bags, actually 2 points, back to Ali Zirkel's point about what she's packing this year. She said that she's bringing all battery-operated headlamps and other devices because she isn't anticipating any place where to charge up her headlamps or GPSs or iPhones or anything like that. And that's pretty interesting because now the new tech headlamps all have rechargeable batteries. I know my headlamp comes with a big battery brick that has to be recharged, and I have 4 or 5 of those batteries that can only be charged with electricity, or it could go solar, but that's a big pain in the butt. But battery operated headlamps are the thing, of course, these days. And lastly, you had mentioned the food in the drop bags. Most mushers have little treats that they put in each drop bag, especially as they get further and further down the trail, something that they know that they're anticipating or know that they will really enjoy. I remember one time on the Serum Run expedition, the musher coordinator packed a bunch of McDonald's cheeseburgers in the drop bags, and when they arrived in Unalakleet, she gave everybody a McDonald's cheeseburger, and that was the highlight of the trip because you were on the trail for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden you get a McDonald's cheeseburger. That's like a birthday cake for sure. So yeah, drop bags are an interesting subject for sure. Anything else on that before we move into our musher profile?
Just that it really makes a lot of sense to, some people have said to me in years past, well, isn't it unfair to keep the food, the people food and the dog food, if somebody either leaves the drop bag there or scratches? And I think that that's something that is sort of built into the whole way that Iditarod interacts with some of these villages. This is sort of a little extra bonus, and I think that it would be very difficult to ship that back to Anchorage or ship it up to Nome. So that completely makes sense to me.
Yeah, and you had said that sometimes it takes weeks for things to come back, and that's absolutely true. I've been to Iditarod headquarters and picked up people's extra sleds and drop bags 2 or 3 weeks after the race. So you can imagine what would happen if they had dog food or people food in those bags. And on your bags, you mark them as some of the bags you can mark as frozen, which is typically the dog food or the people food. So there's just no way to keep that. So it has to have a way to be distributed along the trail. And the best way to do that, of course, is to give it to other folks that could potentially need it. What's interesting this year is that many of the places where they're stopping, there's not a lot of village dog teams in a lot of these spots. Of course, as you work your way going the traditional routes, you have dog teams in Ruby and Unalakleet and Cowtag and Shaktoolik and other places where people live. They still run dogs, but a lot of these places there's no dog team. So it's interesting to see what they would do with a lot of these dog food bags, since there's not a lot of dog food kennels out there anymore. So let's jump into our musher profile of the evening. One of my top picks this year, and I know that Tony has an interest in Brenda Mackey as well. I'm sure you are interested to see what she does on the trail. What do you know about Brenda?
So Brenda Mackey is someone who comes from one of the sort of family dynasties in dog mushing, and certainly in the modern Iditarod. She is the 6th Mackey and the first female Mackey to run the Iditarod. She was born soon after her grandfather, Dick Mackey, won the Iditarod by 1 second over Rick Swenson in 1978. She's also the daughter of Rick Mackey, who won the Iditarod as well. She is the niece of Jason and Lance Mackey, and when she was her father Rick operated Mackey's Happy Dog Kennel, and I know it's a little there are so many Mackeys that it's a little bit hard to keep track of which kennel was which, but her dad operated the Mackey's Happy Dog Kennel, and she helped her parents around the kennel, and really was brought up from a very, very young age running dogs. She entered and won her first dog race when she was 3 years old, and that was running in a 1-dog class. I'm not sure how long it was. I can't imagine it would be very long if she was 3. But that's just to show you how long she has been on the runners. She was homeschooled, and her parents moved up to Nenana when she was relatively young, where there was better snow. She was homeschooled so she could spend as much time as possible helping out with the kennel. By age 14, she was training puppy teams and guiding tours. At age 19, she competed in the Yukon Quest, and she was, I believe, the youngest person ever to compete in the Quest. The Quest then named her the youth ambassador for the Yukon Quest and sent her to various countries in Europe to help promote the race. She met Will Rhodes when they were both working as guides at the Alaska Icefields Expedition Company on the Mendenhall Glacier in Juneau. They then got married, and she said that her real life, her family life sort of took over for a while. She never stopped interacting with dogs and having dogs, but stopped racing for a while. They were raising their daughter. She was finishing college. She graduated in 2007 with a double major in psychology and sociology. Brenda and Will moved to Two Rivers in 2012 and started building up their own kennel once their daughter had been was old enough for them to do so. So they now run a kennel that is called Mackey's Alaskan Distance Dogs, as opposed to the various other Mackey kennels. And she said that once she started getting back into racing, it was just like she had never stopped, even though there was a period of about 10 or 12 years where she hadn't been doing it. It's very exciting that someone who is a rookie has as much experience and as much of a mushing heritage as she does. I think she's going to do very, very well. And I just wanted to mention a few of the dogs that are on her team, because she has a great Facebook page where she's introduced most of the dogs who are going to be running with her. So she has her main leader is a dog named Spark, who is 5 years old, and she said he's especially good for starts and finishes. She has a dog named Big Brave, who is a 70-pound dog, the biggest dog in her kennel. And she said he's an ideal racing dog with super endurance. He was bred by her uncle Lance Mackey from his great lead dog Zorro, and then for a while was in her uncle Jason Mackey's kennel. She dropped Big Brave last year when she was running the Cusco 300. And even though he's a big dog, he's very, very fast. And he got loose at the airport in Bethel and ran around, and no one could catch him. He was just evading every attempt to capture him and just running all over the place and being a very happy, escaped husky. And the only way that he was able to be subdued was when Brenda came to the airport, and then he just ran right up to her and was totally docile and acting like, okay, mom's here now, I have to behave. She also has a dog named Loyalty, who is an 8-year-old leader and 4-time Iditarod finisher, and a dog named Hooligan, who's 7 and is a great team dog. And she describes him as a trotting machine. And Hooligan actually was supposed to go to Canada to be a stud for another dog of hers named Sophie, who is now with a different kennel. But because of the border restrictions, they weren't able to get Hooligan to Canada to perform his stud duties. So he is now racing with her on her Iditarod team. So that's Brenda Mackey, and a look at a few of her dogs that she's on the trail with.
Alex, Brenda Mackey is a friend of mine. Over a third of our kennel is Brenda Mackey's dogs, which is very interesting. I was thinking about that last night. 12 of our 35 dogs are from her lines, and she has an exceptional line of dogs, and she's very, very selective on who she places dogs with, and I'm very pleased with what we have with her dogs. But yes, she is my pick for Rookie of the Year. I know both you and Tony picked Dakota Schlossler, which is a very close second in my book, but I think she's going to do very well. Her and her husband will do very good in every race that they enter. If they don't win it, they're always in the top 5, and I think that she is going to do exceptionally well on the race itself. Before we close, Alex, where is Brenda as we speak here tonight on the show?
So she is. There's a huge pileup. There's a lot of people who are very, very close together. And I think Brenda is currently in 39th place as we're taping this. That's a little bit deceptive. She's at mile 153 and she's in 39th. And if you go up to 15 miles ahead of her at mile 168 is 21st place. So there's 18 teams within 15 miles of each other.
And where is that on the trail where everybody's sort of bunched up?
That is, it's right around, let me just call this up for a second. It's around Rainy Pass, a little bit past Rainy Pass, not quite at Rome.
Oh, so is that over the steps and all of that, or is that before?
I think that's before. I think it's just before.
So, yeah, I can imagine that's going to be a really interesting section. We talked about that yesterday. It'll be a really interesting section coming back. I was reading some trail reports about that, and there was one report in particular where it talks about the steepness of going up to the steps before, obviously, it's kind of world renowned about going down, but I guess it's one heck of a steep hill going up there. So of course they have to run back down that way, which has never been done before in a race. So I cannot wait till we talk about that in several days about how folks are doing the return route of this. You know, it's pretty commonplace to go that way to get there, but of course that coming back will be really interesting as well. Alex, anything else before we go tonight?
Just wanted to piggyback on what you just said and add that I think the teams that are going to be really at an advantage there are teams where the musher has done a lot of weight training and a lot of stamina training, because there's going to be a lot of running beside the sled and a lot of having to be off the runners and going uphill. So that's something that if someone is in really good shape, they are going to almost automatically be at a big advantage on that section of the race.
And you can think about who's who of that, especially those front runners when you're thinking about those really fit guys and gals, when you're thinking about Allie Zirkle and Ryan Reddington and Ramey Smith and Jesse Holmes and Yor Olsum and all of those guys are just exceptional human athletes themselves. So I think guys like that will definitely have at least a little bit easier of a time up and down those hills than maybe some of the other folks. Alex, it's always a pleasure having you on. We will be back on tomorrow night for our Day 3 coverage of the 2021 Iditarod, and we will welcome back our co-host for this year, Tony Ryder. She's going to be joining us as well. Alex, thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks, Robert.
Thank you. On behalf of my co-host, Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto for DogWorks Radio. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Radio Free Palmer, 89.5 KVRF, presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.